She was stripped and auctioned in front of the crowd, until a kind stranger bought her and gave her dignity back. The marketplace of broken souls. The morning sun of Kepler Station was artificial, but it burned just as harsh as any real star. The Mao station hung at the edge of civilized space, a massive ring of metal and desperation where the galaxy's laws meant nothing and everything had a price. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn jacket against the recycled air that always smelled faintly of rust and regret. He had come here for spare parts for his cargo ship, nothing more. The Horizon's Edge needed a new stabilizer core, and Kepler Station was the only place within 3 jumps where questions weren't asked about serial numbers. The main marketplace stretched before him like a wound in the station's belly. Vendors shouted in a dozen languages, their stalls crammed with salvage weapons and things better left unexamined. Marcus kept his head down, following his handheld scanner toward the parts district. But the crowd was thick today, pressing him toward the center of the market where a different kind of commerce was taking place. The auction platform rose from the market floor like a judge's bench, all harsh angles and cold metal. Marcus had seen these before on other fringe stations, but he always managed to avoid them. Today, the press of bodies left him no choice but to witness what was happening above. The auctioneer was a Grothan, his forearms gesturing wildly as he called out to the crowd. His species were known for their merchant skills and their complete lack of what humans called conscience. On the platform stood 5 figures in restraint collars. Marcus recognized the species. A pair of Rigelian miners, their blue skin dulled with exhaustion, an old Terran colonist who kept his eyes fixed on the ground, a young Altarian whose wings had been bound, and at the end, a Zilani female. The Zilani were a proud species, known for their bronze-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light and their remarkable aptitude for technology. This one stood differently from the others. While they hunched in defeat, she held her shoulders straight despite the thin metallic mesh that barely covered her form, designed more to humiliate than clothe. The auctioneer pulled her forward by a chain attached to her collar. She stumbled but caught herself, her amber eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of defiance and carefully controlled fear. Her long silver hair, a trait unique to her species, had been roughly cut short, another deliberate humiliation. The crowd laughed as the auctioneer made crude jokes about Zilani's stubbornness and how it could be beaten out of them with enough effort. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He had fought alongside Zilani engineers during the border wars 5 years ago. They were brilliant, loyal, and deserved better than this. The woman on the platform reminded him of Lieutenant Zara, who had saved his crew by reconfiguring their life support system with nothing but spare parts and determination. Zara had died getting them to safety, and Marcus had never forgotten. The debt. The bidding started low. The auctioneer seemed frustrated by the lack of enthusiasm. Zilani were valuable for their technical skills, but this one had been labeled as difficult, a trouble case who had allegedly sabotaged her previous owner's ship. The crowd was wary. Marcus watched as a Vorthan slaver raised a tentacle, offering a price that would barely buy a used power cell. The auctioneer's expression soured, but he continued his pitch, yanking the chain to make the Zilani woman turn, displaying her like livestock. That was when Marcus saw it, the slight movement of her fingers against her thigh. She was tapping out a pattern. Not random nervousness, but a sequence. It was old Earth Morse code, something almost no non-human would recognize. Over and over, she tapped the same message. "Help me." Marcus pushed through the crowd before his rational mind could stop him. His voice cut through the noise of the market. 5,000 credits. The crowd turned to stare. It was 10 times the current bid. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greed, but also surprise. Humans rarely participated in these auctions, and when they did, it usually meant trouble. The Vorthan slaver gurgled something that Marcus's translator interpreted as an insult about human sentimentality. It raised its bid to 6,000. Marcus didn't hesitate. 10,000. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That was serious money, enough to buy a small ship. The Vorthan's skin flushed purple with anger, but it withdrew from the bidding. No one else spoke up. The auctioneer looked almost disappointed that the bidding war had ended so quickly, but credits were credits. Marcus climbed onto the platform as the auctioneer processed the transaction through his datapad. Up close, he could see the marks on the Zilani woman's wrists where the restraints had cut into her skin, the bruise on her shoulder shaped like a hand. Her amber eyes met his, and he saw the war there between hope and the expectation of more cruelty. Marcus shrugged off his jacket and held it out to her. The auctioneer started to protest that the sale wasn't finalized, but Marcus's glare silenced him. She took the jacket slowly, as if expecting it to be yanked away. When it wasn't, she pulled it on, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar fastenings. It was too big for her, but it covered her, gave her back some dignity. The crowd had gone quiet, unsure what to make of this human who paid fortune-level credits just to immediately show kindness. The transaction completed with a series of beeps from the auctioneer's pad. The restraint collar fell away from the Zilani woman's neck with a click. She rubbed the raw skin there, still watching Marcus with those careful eyes. He gestured toward the steps leading down from the platform. She moved toward them, then stopped, looking back at the other four still standing in their collars. Marcus saw the question in her eyes. He checked his credit balance and sighed. He couldn't afford them all, but he could do something. He turned to the auctioneer. The old man. How much? The Grothan's 4 eyes narrowed with calculation. 3,000. Marcus transferred the credits without bargaining. The collar clicked open, and the old colonist almost collapsed with relief. Marcus steadied him with one hand. The man whispered something in Portuguese that Marcus's translator didn't catch, but the tone was clear enough. As they descended from the platform, the crowd parted. Some faces showed confusion, others a grudging respect, and a few displayed open hostility. Marcus kept himself between the two freed people and the worst of the stares. The Zilani woman walked beside him, her back straight again now that she wore his jacket like armor against the world's cruelty. They had almost reached the edge of the market when she spoke for the first time. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. Why? Marcus glanced at her, noting how she had positioned herself to have clear sightlines to 3 different exits. Smart, cautious, survivor instincts. Because someone should have, he said simply. She processed this, her amber eyes studying his face as if trying to decode a complex equation. I'm not what they said. I didn't sabotage anything. I refused to build weapons for raiders. That's why they sold me. Marcus nodded. That tracked with what he knew of Zilani ethics. They would share their technical knowledge freely for peaceful purposes, but would die before creating tools of war for criminals. The old colonist spoke up, his voice shaky. I have family on Sigma Colony. If you could just get me to a transport hub. Marcus was already pulling up his datapad, checking shipping schedules. There was a reputable passenger liner leaving in 6 hours. He bought the man a ticket and added enough credits for food and clothes. The old man's eyes filled with tears. He gripped Marcus's hand with both of his weathered ones, speaking rapid Portuguese that needed no translation. After the colonist left for the transport hub, Marcus turned to the Zilani woman. They stood in a quieter section of the station, away from the market's chaos. I have a ship, he said. It's not much, but it's safe. You can stay until you figure out where you want to go. No obligations, no expectations, just a place to rest and recover. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers unconsciously adjusting the jacket around her shoulders. I don't even know your name, she said finally. Marcus Chen, captain of the Horizon's Edge. And you? She straightened slightly. I am Kira Telvazari, engineer, formerly of the research vessel Starbridge before raiders took it. Marcus extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Kira looked at it for a moment, then reached out and shook it carefully as if sealing a pact she didn't quite understand yet. Her grip was firm despite everything she had endured. They walked toward the docking bays, 2 unlikely companions, brought together by a moment of human decency in a place that had forgotten what that meant. Behind them, the market continued its terrible business, but something had shifted. A few in the crowd had seen what happened, had witnessed a human pay a fortune just to give someone their dignity back. The story would spread through the station's bars and back alleys, growing with each telling. It was a small thing, perhaps, but on Kepler Station even small kindnesses were revolutions. An unexpected alliance. The Horizon's Edge sat in Docking Bay 47 like a patient old friend. Marcus had owned the freight hauler for 8 years, and while it wasn't pretty, it was reliable. The hull showed patches where he'd repaired meteor damage, and the paint was more memory than reality. But the ship was clean, functional, and most importantly, it was home. Kira stopped at the bottom of the boarding ramp, her trained eye scanning the vessel's exterior. Marcus could see her cataloging every detail. The slightly misaligned thruster ports that suggested engine trouble, the newer model shield generators that didn't match the ship's age, the cleverly disguised weapon mounts that weren't exactly legal for a civilian freighter. Her expression shifted from wary to intrigued. Inside, the ship was cramped but organized. Marcus had converted one of the cargo bays into a small living area with a kitchenette and common space. He showed Kira to the spare cabin, barely larger than a closet but private and clean. She stood in the doorway, seemingly overwhelmed by the simple dignity of having her own space. Marcus left her to settle in and headed to the bridge to plan their departure. 20 minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. Kira had found a pair of work coveralls in the cabin's storage locker and changed into them, his jacket folded neatly in her arms. She held it out to him, but he waved it off. "Keep it. The temperature regulators in that cabin are temperamental." She nodded, draping it over a chair with careful precision. Her eyes moved across the bridge's console, and Marcus saw her expression change. It was like watching someone who had been holding their breath finally exhale. The technology, the systems, the blinking lights, this was her world, her language. She moved closer to the navigation panel, not touching but studying. "Your stabilizer is failing," she said quietly. "I can hear it in the harmonics. Maybe 4, 5 more jumps before it cuts out completely." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "3 jumps according to my last diagnostic. You've got good ears." Kira's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "I've been listening to ship songs since I was young. My father was an engineer too." She paused, then added, "The raiders killed him when they took our vessel. He refused to help them retrofit it for combat." The weight of that statement hung between them. Marcus understood now why she had been labeled difficult, why she had those bruises. She had watched her father die for principles and then held to those same principles herself, no matter the cost. That took a kind of courage that transcended species or culture. A sudden alarm shattered the moment. Marcus's hands flew across the controls, pulling up external sensors. 3 ships were descending on the station, moving in attack formation. The configuration was unmistakable. 4th and Empire Raiders, the same group that had been terrorizing this sector for months. But this was bold even for them, attacking a station directly. The station's defensive guns swiveled to meet them, but Kepler Station's defenses were more suggestion than threat. Half the weapons were probably non-functional, sold off by corrupt administrators. The first Vorthon ship fired, its plasma cannons tearing through the station's shields like tissue paper. Explosions rippled along the outer ring. Marcus was already firing up his engines when Kira spoke. "The refugee quarter. That's what they're targeting. It's where the Empire keeps people they've captured but haven't sold yet. They're reclaiming their property." Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the console. Marcus knew he should run. The Horizon's Edge was no match for even 1 Vorthon raider, let alone 3. But he thought about the old colonist he'd freed, probably still waiting at the transport hub. He thought about the others on that platform, still in collars. He thought about Kira, standing straight despite everything they'd tried to break in her. "Can you handle the weapon systems?" he asked. Kira's amber eyes widened slightly. "Your hidden guns? Yes, but they won't do much against military shields." Marcus was already pulling up a different screen. "Not planning to fight them directly, but if we can disrupt their formation, maybe give the station's evacuation protocols time to kick in." Kira slid into the co-pilot seat, her fingers dancing across the weapons console with practiced ease. Despite her ordeal, despite having every reason to just flee, she was ready to fight. Their lead ship has a weakness, she said suddenly. Vorthan raiders use a specific shield frequency that leaves them vulnerable to ionic disruption. If we can generate a focused pulse, Marcus stared at her. Can you do that with our systems? She was already reconfiguring the weapon controls. Not perfectly, but maybe enough. I need access to your engineering deck. Marcus handed her his access codes without hesitation. It was a level of trust that should have taken months to build, but sometimes crises compress time. As Kira disappeared toward engineering, Marcus maneuvered the Horizon's Edge out of the docking bay. The scene outside was chaos. Ships fled in every direction while the Vorthan raiders methodically destroyed the station's defenses. The refugee quarter was burning, but escape pods were launching. Someone had managed to trigger the evacuation. Kira's voice crackled over the comm. I'm rerouting power from the jump drive to create an ionic burst. You'll have one shot, maybe two, before our systems overload. Marcus targeted the lead raider, waiting for the perfect moment. The Vorthan ship was focused on the station, its shields oriented forward. Now, Kira shouted. The Horizon's Edge shuddered as every spare watt of power flowed through jury-rigged connections into a massive ionic pulse. The blast caught the lead raider's shields at exactly the wrong frequency. Blue lightning cascaded across its hull, and its systems flickered and died. The ship listed to one side, suddenly vulnerable. The station's remaining defensive guns, operated by someone who knew an opportunity when they saw it, concentrated fire on the disabled raider. The Vorthan ship exploded in a brilliant flash, and the two remaining raiders pulled back, suddenly cautious. They hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from a battered freighter, but the effort had cost them. The Horizon's Edge's lights dimmed, and the engine coughed. Kira came running back to the bridge, soot on her face and her hands slightly burned from hot connections. Jump drives down, sublights at maybe 60%, we need to run. Marcus was already plotting an escape vector when the comm system chirped. It was a broad-spectrum transmission from one of the fleeing ships. Horizon's Edge, this is the transport vessel Haven's promise. We've got 300 refugees aboard but no weapons. Can you provide cover? Marcus and Kira exchanged glances. They both knew what staying meant. The raiders would regroup, come after them with a vengeance, but 300 lives hung in the balance. Kira touched one of her burns absently and said, My father would have stayed. Marcus nodded. Then we stay. He opened the comm channel. Haven's promise, this is Horizon's Edge. Fall in behind us. We'll screen you as long as we can. Other voices joined the channel. Small ships, private vessels, even a few station security fighters that had launched. The ionic pulse had done more than disable one raider. It had given people hope, shown them that the Vorthans could be hurt. What followed was 20 minutes of desperate flying. Marcus pushed his damaged ship to its limits, using every trick he'd learned in 20 years of sailing the Black. Kira managed their failing systems like a conductor with an orchestra, shifting power between shields and engines with split-second timing. They couldn't fight the raiders directly, but they could be an annoyance, a distraction, buying time for the refugee ships to reach minimum safe distance for a jump. When the last refugee vessel flickered into hyperspace, Marcus finally let himself breathe. The Horizon's Edge was running on fumes, half their systems fried, but they were alive. The remaining Vorthan raiders, frustrated by their losses and the unexpected resistance, turned their guns on the station itself before withdrawing. Kepler Station would survive, but it would bear new scars. As they limped back to dock, Kira sat quietly in the co-pilot's chair. Finally, she spoke. You asked why I trust you. It's because you didn't just free me. You gave me the chance to be myself again, to use my skills for something that mattered. She gestured at the damaged console. I can fix this, all of it. Better than it was before, if you'll let me. Marcus smiled, exhaustion making him honest. Kira, after what you just did, this ship is as much yours as mine. Partners? She considered this, then extended her hand in the human gesture she'd learned. Partners. They shook on it as Kepler Station's damaged docking bay came into view. The station would need rebuilding, but something else had been built today. an alliance between two people who had found courage in each other's strength. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but sometimes in the darkest corners humanity's light shined brightest when reflected in the eyes of those they chose to stand beside. The price of freedom. 3 weeks had passed since the Vorthan attack. The Horizon's Edge sat in dry dock, its hull gleaming with new patches and upgrades that should have cost twice what Marcus had paid. But Kira had made friends among the stations, repair crews, fellow engineers who recognized genuine talent when they saw it. They traded expertise and favors rather than credits, the universal currency of those who worked with their hands. Marcus found Kira in the ship's engineering section, half buried in the jump drive housing. Only her legs were visible, and the air was filled with the rapid-fire clicking of her native language as she swore at a particularly stubborn coupling. He'd learned that Zelani cursing was surprisingly musical. She emerged, a streak of grease across her bronze cheek, and noticed him watching. The manifold is almost ready. 2 more days, maybe 3, and we'll have jump capability better than military spec. Her transformation over these weeks had been remarkable. The haunted wariness had faded, replaced by the focused intensity of someone doing what they were born to do. She'd even let her silver hair grow out a bit, though she kept it tied back while working. The repair crews called her Silver Fox for her ability to solve problems that had stumped them for months. But Marcus had noticed the way she still tensed when certain ships docked, how she checked the news feeds obsessively for Vorthan activity. She was healing, but she wasn't free. Not yet. That evening, as they shared a meal of reconstituted protein and what passed for vegetables on Kepler Station, Kira set down her fork with deliberate precision. Marcus had learned this meant she had something important to say. "I need to tell you something," she began. "About why the Raiders really wanted me." Marcus waited, not pushing. She continued. "My father wasn't just an engineer. He was part of a research team that found something in the wastes beyond chartered space. A cache of predecessor technology, perfectly preserved, the kind that could revolutionize jump drive technology, maybe even allow instantaneous travel between galaxies." Marcus whistled low. The predecessors were legends, an ancient race that had disappeared millennia ago, leaving only ruins and mysteries. Working predecessor tech was the holy grail of salvagers and governments alike. "The Raiders found out?" Kira nodded. "They captured our ship to get the location from my father. When he refused and they killed him, they thought I knew. I don't. Not exactly. But I remember enough of his notes, his calculations. With time and the right equipment, I might be able to find it again." She met his eyes. "That's why they won't. Stop hunting me. Why that auctioneer was so frustrated when I wasn't selling for more. I'm not just a troublesome engineer. I'm a map to unlimited power." Before Marcus could respond, every alarm on the station began screaming. He pulled up his datapad, linking to the Horizon's Edge's sensors. His blood chilled. 12 ships, all Vorthan configuration but not Raiders. These were military vessels, including a battlecruiser. The Empire itself had come. The station's administrator's voice crackled over the public comm, trying to sound authoritative but failing to hide his fear. "Attention, Kepler Station. The Vorthan Empire demands the return of stolen property, specifically the Zelani engineer designated Kira Telvazari. You have 1 hour to comply or we will take her by force." Kira had gone very still, the color draining from her bronze skin. Marcus grabbed his jacket, the same one she'd worn that first day, and started toward the door. "We're running. Now." But Kira didn't move. "No," she said quietly. "I won't let them destroy this station for me. These people took us in, helped us. I can't." The door to their quarters burst open. Marcus expected Vorthan soldiers, but instead, it was a group of station residents. The repair chief, a gruff human named Torres, the Altarian whose wings Marcus had seen bound at the auction, now free and carrying a rifle. The old colonist, who had somehow never made it to his transport. Behind them, others, humans, aliens, a mix of species and backgrounds. Torres spoke first. "We heard the demand. We've come to make you an offer." He looked at Kira. You stay and fight. We all do. This station has been under the boot of one empire or another for too long. Maybe it's time that changed. The old colonist stepped forward. You gave me freedom, but I realized I had nowhere to go that meant more than here. This place, these people who showed kindness when they didn't have to. This is worth defending. Marcus looked around the room at these faces, scarred and weathered, by hard lives but united in this moment. He thought about humanity's history, about standing up to bullies not because you could win, but because it was right. You know they outgun us significantly, he said. Torres grinned. Sure, but Silver Fox here has been sharing some interesting theories about shield frequencies with the repair crews, and we've been busy. He pulled up a schematic on his pad. The station itself had been quietly transformed into a massive ionic weapon, using Kira's principle but on a scale that made Marcus's jaw drop. Kira was staring at the schematic, her engineer's mind already improving it. It could work, but we'd need someone to manually trigger it from the central power core. It would be... She paused, understanding the implications. A one-way trip. Not necessarily, Marcus said, his own mind racing. Not if we time it right. Not if we're smart about this. He turned to the group. How many ships can we get flight ready in an hour? The discussion that followed was part strategy session, part rebellion planning, and part family meeting. Because that's what they'd become, Marcus realized. This ragtag group of misfits and refugees had become something more. When the hour was nearly up, they were ready. Kira stood in the station's command center, her hands on the controls of their improvised weapon. Marcus was on the horizon's edge, leading a small fleet of converted freighters and patched fighters. The station's population had been evacuated to the inner sections, shielded from what was about to happen. The Vorthon commander's voice boomed across the comm. Time's up. Surrender the Zilani or face the consequences. Marcus opened a channel to respond, but it was Kira's voice that rang out, broadcast on all frequencies. I am Kira Telvazari, daughter of Joran Telvazari, engineer of the free ship Horizon's Edge. I am not property. I am not a map to be read. I am a free being, and I choose to stand with those who stood with me. The Vorthon commander started to reply, but Kira continued. You want the location of the predecessor cache? Come and take it, but know that you'll have to go through every free soul on this station first, and we've learned something about fighting. Bullies. Sometimes you don't have to win. You just have to make the cost too high. She triggered the ionic weapon. The entire station lit up like a small star, sending out a pulse that washed over the Vorthon fleet. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it was enough to drop their shields, scramble their systems, leave them vulnerable. And in that moment, of vulnerability, every ship that could fly, every weapon that could fire struck at once. The battle was chaos. The Horizon's Edge, with Kira's improvements, danced between the larger ships hitting and running. The converted freighters, piloted by beings who had everything to lose and everything to fight for, flew with desperate courage. The Vorthon battlecruiser, pride of their fleet, found itself swarmed by ships that shouldn't have been a threat but suddenly were. The turning point came when other ships began arriving. The refugees that had fled weeks ago, they'd heard Kira's broadcast and came back. A Zilani diplomatic vessel drawn by their citizens' plea. Even a human military patrol, officially neutral but somehow finding themselves in exactly the right place to observe the battle, while their weapons accidentally targeted Vorthon ships. The Vorthon Empire, faced with an increasingly costly battle, for one person and the real possibility of a diplomatic incident, withdrew. Their commander's last transmission was a curse in their gurgling language, promising that this wasn't over, but for now, for today, Kepler Station stood free. In the aftermath, as damaged ships limped back to dock and the wounded were tended, Kira found Marcus on the observation deck. They stood together, looking out at the stars and the debris field that had once been Vorthon's superiority. The predecessor cache, Marcus said quietly. Were you telling the truth? Do you really know where it is? Kira smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her. My father found something, yes, but it wasn't weapons or jump drives. It was a message, a warning about the dangers of empire and conquest, and a gift, the knowledge of how to stand against oppression. The ionic pulse, that was part of it. The rest, she gestured at the station, at the beings of different species working together to repair and rebuild. The rest was teaching us that our greatest technology isn't in our machines. It's in choosing to stand together. Marcus absorbed this, then chuckled. So you let them think? Kira's smile turned mischievous. Let them waste resources hunting for something that doesn't exist the way they think it does. My father would have appreciated the irony. Torres approached them, limping but grinning. The station council is meeting. They want to declare independence, make Kepler Station a true free port. They want you both on the council. He looked at Kira. Especially you, Silver Fox, you've become something of a symbol. Kira looked uncomfortable with that idea, but Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. Symbols matter, he said. They remind people what's possible. She considered this, then nodded slowly. Then I'll serve, but as myself, not as a symbol. And my first proposal will be to ban slave auctions permanently. The measure passed unanimously. 6 months later, Kepler Station had transformed. It was still rough around the edges, still a haven for those on the margins, but it was free. The auction platform had been torn down and replaced with a memorial garden, each plant representing a different world, growing together in defiance of those who would separate them. Marcus and Kira stood in that garden, watching the artificial sun set over their unlikely home. The horizon's edge was fully repaired, ready to fly wherever they wanted. But they stayed because this was where they were needed, where they'd found purpose. No regrets? Marcus asked. Kira touched the collar scars on her neck, almost faded, now. None. That day on the platform I thought my story was ending. Instead it was just beginning. She looked at him, her amber eyes warm. Thank you for buying my freedom that day. Marcus shook his head. I didn't buy your freedom, Kira. You were always free. I just reminded you of it. You reminded all of us. A new ship was requesting docking permission, another refugee seeking sanctuary. Kira headed to the docking bay to greet them, to offer them the same chance she'd been given. Marcus followed because that's what partners did. They faced the universe together. Two unlikely allies who had discovered that freedom wasn't something you could buy or sell. It was something you chose, every day, in every action, in every hand extended to help another rise. The galaxy was vast, often cruel and full of those who would put chains on others. But it was also full of those who would break them. One auction platform at a time, one act of courage at a time, one choice to stand together at a time. And in that choice, humanity's greatest strength was revealed, not in their technology or their weapons, but in their ability to see dignity in others and fight for it no matter the cost. The story of the last auction of Kepler Station would spread across the galaxy, growing with each telling. But for Marcus and Kira, it was simply Tuesday, and there was work to do. There were always more people to free, more bullies to face, more gardens to plant where platforms once stood, and they would do it together, because that's what free beings did. They chose their path and they walked it with their heads held high.